Hello and welcome to A Young Man's Guide to Life, podcast 10. It's a milestone. We're here today for the monthly mental health check-in with Darren Mellor. Hi, Darren.
Hey, Steve. Glad to be here for the milestone. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. Very good to hear from you. So these monthly mental health check-ins, God, life's been busy because we've probably not done this one exactly on the month, but we're here. And these are important to us because we were talking about today how to handle mental health. And you know what? I've got some examples this time. I don't know about you.
Always, every day is an example.
You know what? I'm doing this thing at the moment, as you know, on resilience. And I'm doing like a talk. I'm preparing a talk on personal resilience. And one of the key things that I say in the talk is you can't avoid stress. You can't avoid life. You can't avoid things going wrong, adversities, stresses, mishaps. You just can't avoid it. So rather than trying to avoid them, we've got to change our mindset and think about how can we best deal with them, basically. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it reminds me then because we were.
So have you nailed that then as part of the thing you've done, the content that you've created? I guess you've tried to
Yeah,
cover that.
I have. And some of the content I've got to thank you for because two of the techniques that we've talked about on this podcast on the monthly mental health check-in, talking about taking regular breaks, the productivity breaks actually increases your productivity. You alerted me to an article on that, which I've researched, and I've researched extra articles, and they all say the same thing. Taking regular breaks, it does help you. It reduces your stress levels again to a normal level, so you carry on the work, but it also helps you focus better, productivity's up. All of that is super important. So yeah, I've got to thank you for that. And the exercise one, the dopamine and depression relationship, it's a one way of dealing with stress. Having a bit of exercise, going for a walk, regular breaks, both super important. So stress is inevitable. This is one thing like we're talking to, but also when we spoke on the phone this week about what we were going to cover in this topic on this podcast, we call them blips, don't we? Like me and you, we always say, "Oh, I've had a blip recently." I thought we'd cover that today. So, what is a blip?
I think that's a great place to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is a blip? Do you want to take it? I can take it if you want. So
yeah. I talked too much, I think, today.
All right, I'll give you a break. I think it's just life, right? I mean, stuff happens. Like we're just trying to kind of talk amongst ourselves partly here, aren't we? It's like therapy for us almost, but obviously for other people as well. Hopefully, that's the intention. But we've got some stuff we've kind of tried and maybe not. It's not succeeded, and maybe other stuff we've tried and it's kind of helped us. And kind of you do more of that stuff, don't you, and less of the other stuff, and you kind of keep refining it and evolving it. And you might have your routines, you might have like books, you might have like certain people who you can kind of sort of go to when you really kind of hitting those lows, and those sorts of people can help you professionally or just like friends or family or whatever. So I know we're kind of on that journey, right? We're constantly trying to sort of set ourselves up so we can deal with life and whatever comes our way, which some of which you can try and navigate, and some of which you just can't predict. I can't predict what's going to happen with the weather. I can't predict what's going to happen with my car. No matter how much I spend on the best car, there's something might happen to it, or the holiday that I book, something might happen with the flight, or the job I've got. Somebody might let me down. They've promised to deliver something, but it's kind of my name on the delivery, and they're one small part of the delivery. But if they don't deliver when they said they would, then I can't recover from that, and then I've got to go back to the customer, and I've got a very embarrassing Friday afternoon conversation to have. So it's those aspects, like friends letting you down. I'm up for that Friday. You really need that Friday night, and then your mate goes, I can't be bothered, sorry, something's come up, and you're like, oh, you're joking. Nightmare. I think it happens to all the time, and some of these blips are smaller than others, right? You might just go, I'll just laugh at it, it's funny. And other ones, depending on where you're up to in that day, you might go, I'm all right with like Steve bailing on a night out, but actually this weekend I'm not all right with it because I desperately needed to get out and I've got no plan B. so that might, if you know, one week it might impact you, the other week it might not impact you, or you might just wind the other person up about it. So it's kind of like, it depends on where you're at. So yeah, I think the thing I've been trying to work on is like noticing that you're having a blip is the first point, right? So you don't get sucked into sort of negative sort of like processing and then trying to, it's like recover from it. So obviously you want to try and have less blips, but I think getting to zero is not possible. And then trying to keep the blips as sort of short as possible so that you get out of them quickly, and also so you don't go too deep into the blip.
That's important.
So it's kind of like in IT, it's kind of like how I was thinking about the other day, like mean time to recovery, and like all these stats you have for like infrastructure and keeping the service and the lights on. Like, you know, stuff will break. How quickly can you fix it so it's back online? And when it does break, how can you mitigate it so that the customer doesn't get too like peed off, like they can't take, you know, cash out of the bank or whatever your job is, right, where you provide a service to somebody, you know. So it's kind of the same with mental health. I think it's like, how quickly can you recover from whatever it is? What can you do to kind of soften it so while you're in the blip? Because let's be honest, there's no magic pill and solution to some of these things. Sometimes you do have to just sit with it, sit in the mud. There's Simon Sinek talks about in his latest podcast on the Diary of a CEO. He's a really good one. I recommend it to your listeners. It came out a few weeks ago, but he talks about just like sometimes you just have to kind of get out of solution mode, and you don't need friends who give you solutions sometimes, and you put the phone down on those sorts of people, and you just want to just be with, just accept and just acknowledge that somebody's in the mud and let them have that moment, and then get out of the mud. Obviously, you know, you're not going to support somebody to be sat in the mud for a long time, and that's the trick. And I think we went away to the other Manchester in the UK called God Manchester. It's quite a strangely named place, but a lovely place, full of lots of old buildings and stuff. Never seen so much thatch going on. Whoever's thatching out that way is doing well.
Good pubs.
But yeah, it's a good catch up. Yeah. We got it recorded as well. We didn't even know we were getting it recorded, but thankfully it's not publicised, some of that content. It's not that bad. It's just probably not suitable for wider consumption. But no, we had a great weekend, and that's like a peak, right? Because we don't get together very often, and probably been 3 years since we've done it. So we had 2 nights together. For those who could make 2 nights. Sorry, Steve, can't resist. So I dealt with that blip quite quickly, but anyway. So I had a lot of goodness. I just started a job. I was in my third week, something like that. And I've started to reduce alcohol because I find it's a bit of an anxiety trigger for me. So it kind of disables some of the natural body sort of responses to kind of deal with anxiety on a normal basis. So like coming out of the other side of drinking, I find there's even more anxiety than normal. So I started to reduce it because of that. And yeah, on the Sunday afternoon, got back, and I think it just kind of all blew up. There's a lot of stuff at home that I hadn't dealt with for a few days with, you know, decisions, how we're getting a dog, you know, things like that. Quite big decisions. And then there's the sort of job uncomfort, unease. I don't know the lingo. I don't know the people. Completely different to my last job. And I hadn't thought about it. I've been distracted by the weekend, and then the sort of coming off the alcohol. Although I hadn't had massive amounts, still for me it was a decent amount. And then I had a panic attack, like from out of nowhere. I was trying to deal with, like, we have like a week, like we review like all big decisions on a Sunday evening, and we just started having that conversation. And it just kind of went really quickly, and I was like, I couldn't think. But what was different this time is that normally those things could last days and weeks,
right?
And I don't even know they're happening. Like, someone would have to tell me you're having a panic attack, or that might be a panic attack. Like I knew instantly it was a panic attack, and then we could stop the conversation. We could sort of try and just sit with it, do something like very simple, like watching Race Around the World. I think it was something very easy to watch, and then we just kind of got over it, started to get over it after that, and then processed it the next day, came back to it the next day and stuff. So yeah, I think trying to just live with them and just accept them and don't be a perfectionist, because that's a really hard bar to set yourself, and that's going to cause other anxieties. So just, we're not here to be telling people to be perfectionists, I don't think, but I think it's kind of acknowledging that we're all going to have stuff which kind of surprises us, and no matter how much, how resilient, robust, or whatever else we think we might be. So it's kind of like, just being okay about that, and having people like who you can trust and call, and just let that be, and then have that moment, and then just get out of it. I think if you could just acknowledge it, get out of it quicker, and then sort of get back to where you were, rather than it lingering. I think, so I thought that was a key thing.
So your panic attack was a blip then, basically, because we call it blip. I don't know if everyone else understands what we mean. What we mean is how you adversely react to a stress. So if stress happens all the time, certain things get cancelled or whatever, you're like, you know what, never mind. I've used an example earlier. I was preparing for this talk, and my example was, you come off the motorway at one junction early, and you're like, oh shit, off the motorway junction early. Then you're like, well, hang on, we're in the countryside. We could probably just find a pub on the way. It'll only be an extra bit of journey time. It doesn't matter. That would be a blip, but that would be a stress thing that will stress you out, but it's not a blip because you haven't adversely reacted to it. Whereas a lot of stuff going on in your personal life and your new job and all that, you're a bit tired, you're hungover, come off the high of a big weekend, and then you have a panic attack about that. That's what we talk about when we talk about a blip. And what I'm getting from your reaction to it this time is you reduce the amount of time that blip lasted for by just accepting it and observing yourself having it. Because I've just finished, I'm just doing another training course, as you can imagine. I'm always doing it. We're addicted, aren't we? I'm doing this course by someone called Amanda Francis, and she talks about being the quiet observer of your patterns and your thoughts. So you have these old patterns and thoughts, bad ways of dealing with things, and accepting them is what you've just said is first step, surely, of not. You beat yourself up about having it, it's only going to happen again and get worse.
I think the first step is seeing it, identifying that it might be happening. This you might not be in control. It might be pissing you off.
Yes.
Like if something's frustrating you, it's like, well, rather than going, oh, it's somebody else's fault, I'm not in control of my destiny. It's like, well, actually, I am. I am allowing myself to get pissed off by this. I'm allowing myself to get stressed by whatever it is. It might be something external, but you can control, can't you?
Yes.
And it's like, well, wait there. Something's triggered me. I'm clearly not. Maybe I haven't got much buffer at the minute. I'm a bit knackered, or I haven't. That could be a very sensitive thing. Whatever it is, that always is going to likely to rile me. It's kind of like, wait there, identify it. Don't jump into it's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
And then sit with it. And then sit with it. Yeah.
So that's the sit with it is probably what I would call accepting it. But first is identifying it, accepting it. And then what was the next bit? I'm sure we covered something else as well, which was observing what's happening, because it's things are unfolding.
How's it affecting you? Is it like there? Is it down in your stomach? I'm just pointing to my stomach. Is it like?
That's a good point.
Is it just thoughts in your head? Are you feeling nauseous? Are you feeling like tired? Frustration? What emotions? It's kind of, and obviously you can just stop and think about that. You could write about that. We talked about journaling before, but whatever it is, I think it could be really quick. It could be seconds, right? And I think the important thing to say with these dips is it's different for different people, and it's even different for me. Like what impacts me at one moment might not impact me at another moment, because I might have more capacity. Like I might be really super rested and like really on top of my game and kind of quite relaxed, and there's not much stress is going on in my life at that moment. So maybe nothing much will get in. Whereas at another point, I could be sort of towards the end of a week. Maybe I've had loads of deliveries that week in my projects. Maybe there's some stuff which didn't go well in the week, and while they didn't bother me, they kind of chipped away at my sort of willpower and resilience, and sort of. So then something really surprisingly small could bother me and be that trigger, which for somebody else wouldn't bother them, or for me at another time wouldn't bother me. So it's kind of like You just need to be open to the fact that it could be anything at any time, and it just depends on where you're up to in life at that moment.
Got it. You just reminded me of something that my missus talks about in her stuff, which is filling your cup. If your cup is full, like you've taken time to be grounded, you feel good about things, you could have 10 stresses that day, but you feel on top of things. So the 11th stress ain't going to do much more than the first one or the second one. It's just normal. But if you've had 10 stresses and you're just trying to get to, like you've heard of it, when you're just trying to get to the toilet and everyone's like chatting to you on the way. But the 10th person that speaks to you on the way to the toilet, you're probably going to flip out on them. You're probably going to throw them across the office or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So that's the difference.
Yes.
How do you keep your cup full? Which is using her analogy. How do you keep you on top of things so that the little things don't matter? Because the little thing will be the straw that breaks the camel's back if you're not keeping on top of things. You keep it full, and that's important. And I've just written that down because I'm preparing for this talk on resilience. And one thing I've forgotten about is filling your cup, like just staying okay. And I think that's the key thing about resilience, which is things happen every day to you, really big ones and small ones, pebbles and rocks, right? So the trick is to stay in a good place and deal with them and take time for yourself and do all the things you've got to do, self-care, before they just get up and up and up and up until like literally you kick off about someone cutting you up on the road or something really small. Because it's normally something tiny that throws you off, isn't it? Because it's an aggregation of stuff. It's an aggregation of things. Filling your cup. I've written that down, by the way.
Yeah. So in my example, I think some of the things I could have done, because I thought about this differently, is I didn't sleep well that week, right? Okay. So that was the first point. Absolutely. I got away with it several days in a row, probably a couple of weeks in a row. I was sleeping really badly. Mm-hmm. And then we went away, and that certainly didn't change that situation, right? When you're going away, you kind of naturally accept you're not going to sleep that well, perhaps. So yeah, I didn't, and then I got back, obviously. Yeah. And I put a lot of pressure on that Sunday. So that was the other thing. I'd put a big amount of work to do on a Sunday afternoon, evening after I got back. It was unrealistic. So I was kind of setting the bar a bit too high for myself. I wasn't realistic. And the third thing, probably, I didn't communicate my concerns to like Emily, my wife, about the state of the nation, the sort of big things we had to discuss. We didn't really have time to discuss them, so I should have just rescheduled that rather than trying to squeeze that in on top of everything else. And probably the fourth thing is speaking to my mentor. I spoke to my mentor, my coach at work, the following week, and it was like I was putting so much pressure on myself at work to be at the same level of productivity as I was at in the job that I was doing for 2 years before, where I knew everything. And it's not realistic. And I'd also put pressure on myself that within 2 weeks, I should have got over the hockey stick of like handover and knowledge, and the handover would finish after 2 weeks, and I'd then be expected to kind of run at full pace. So I'd allowed that thought to slowly creep in and become a firm thought, and it was just misguided. And having spoken to somebody else about it, who's like a professional coach, I guess, it's quite sort of reassuring and surprising to know what I'd done there. And clearly I'm not going to be an expert in 2 weeks. The knowledge transfer, it's going to happen for a lot longer than that. So I gave myself a bit of a break and allowed myself to be uncomfortable. Allowed myself to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable, and just live with that. I can't change that because it's going to I can't fast track the knowledge that I've acquired over 2 years in a short space of time, especially when it's a completely different domain to my last role, right? So there's very little overlap between the two. So I just have to be comfortable that what I had 2 weeks ago, I don't have now. And it's not always going to be like this. It's just temporarily uncomfortable. And just give yourself a bit of a break. Give yourself a break. So those are the things I didn't do, and I think they compounded to cause that. So I kind of let a few things slip. So it's kind of like, it caught me, it got me. So all my normal daily routines that I do and stuff, maybe I'd missed a couple of tricks. I hadn't prioritized sleep. I hadn't prioritized the the changing roles and speaking to my mentor coach about that sort of stuff. And I try to do too much, which is an old habit that we've talked about before, in terms of prioritizing stuff and being more realistic. So it kind of gave me a kick up the bum to go, right, you need to get your ass in gear, Darren. You need to start prioritizing your week a bit more and sticking to it and not doing too much or thinking you can do too much. Yeah.
This is it. It made me think, because the reason the phrase is the straw that broke the camel's back is because they would throw big and small things on top of the camel for it to carry it across the desert. So it will be, I don't know, a big rug and then like a big heavy thing and a gun and a thing and this and that. And literally the one last thing, the straw, would be the thing that like would hurt him and he'd fall over. And for us, the big things like new job, lack of sleep, they're big things. And it all comes in self-care, keeping yourself at homeostasis, keeping yourself a status quo. That status quo can only be done. You're going to take a knock when you got a new job. You're going to take a knock when your kids are sick or when you're not sleeping well. You've got to somehow bring yourself, fill your cup. They fill your cup back up and get yourself normal to handle a new thing like discomfort, pressure you put on yourself, having to deal with a big life-changing event or getting a dog or whatever it is. And I've written down the things that you were saying: discomfort, importance on things, pressure, sleep, stress, booze and illness. Like when you're sick, have you noticed you can't take on other stuff as well? It's because your cup's not full. You need to rest, you need to recover, you need to get better. Same with the hangover, same with lack of sleep, and same with extra stress. I think what we got to do is remember that we can handle one or two big things and a few little things, but we got to call it a day there. I think that's about boundaries, where we've got to say, I've had not had enough sleep, I can't do a big decision today, or I'm not ready, I'm a bit uncomfortable that I am got a new job. I think we should leave something else till later, until I get over the hump of the new job or whatever it is. It's difficult, but we've got to have our boundaries set as how much we can carry. If we're a camel.
Yeah. And I think that all talks about reducing the amount of blips that you might have.
It does.
That's going to really help reduce.
Full.
If your cup's full or close to full, you're going to be able to absorb it like a sponge, right?
Exactly.
And that'll take some away, unless something else comes in, which might take some more away. And I think you're always going to get blips because things will always surprise you. And that's a chance to learn and grow, right? Which is great. That's feedback. It's a feedback loop. If you want to take that feedback, you can look at why that happened and figure out why and try and get even more a bigger cup. You get an even bigger cup, so you can fill it even higher, right? Or you can refill it quicker. So when when you get that first hit and it goes down a bit, you can refill it more quickly. So you can keep learning, but I think always don't be too upset if your cup does get empty or close to empty and you have a reaction to that.
Correct.
But I think that reduces. I think if you can reduce the blips, that's the first part.
Agreed.
And then the second part is probably when they do happen, like what we talked about earlier, how quickly can you identify that happening is going to help you, and then having somebody you can just talk to and accept it and just live with it and just be comfortable with it and don't beat yourself up too much about it, and then how quickly can you recover and get that cup filled back up again, so you don't just wallow in it. And I don't know if I talked about this before, but I was like A-star student at that. I used to do that for my timescales were not minutes and hours. My timescales were days, weeks, and months. Honestly, the sort of smallest of things I would let sit there and keep repeating them in my head and going, why didn't I do better at that? Why did I do that? Why did I let that happen again? What's going on? So yeah, I'd sit in them, and that's distracting you, isn't it? All the time, that's distracting you from filling the cup and kind of getting out of that position. So I think you have to sit in the mud, but then you have to recognize that you can't sit there forever, and you've got to try and then figure out how you can get out of it. I think a lot of it's just not giving yourself a hard time. Like, we're not perfect. You can't have a spotless record. Where did this come
from? Where did we think we have to be able to handle everything and more, and have an empty cup, and still be able to handle more, and still not have a blip about it? I mean, that's the interesting one. Who taught us that? Where did we learn that? Did we pick that up from something? I don't know. So that's an interesting one.
It's an interesting one. We could talk about that all day, and I think it's always been there because we're always comparing ourselves as a human species to others, right? We want to kind of do well, and that helps us because that gives us a goal, but it's very unhelpful as well if it's left unchecked.
Definitely.
Social media and the prevalence of that, and you only see the good stuff.
Exactly.
You don't, nobody can be bothered to post the sort of stuff which doesn't look appealing in their life, like the mess on their floor. That they're only going to post that new thing they've just built in their weekend because they're quite a handy person, and you're going, wow, look at what that person's done, or look at what that person's bought, or look at how much fun they're having that I'm not having. Look how many friends they've got, look how many people have liked their post compared to my post.
Comparison is the thief of joy, and then comparison is the thief of joy even on your own blip, because that's probably subconscious, isn't it? You think, I should be doing better, I should be perfect.
I think so.
When my cup's empty and I've been asked to do one more thing, I just fucking lost it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's because my cup was empty. I think we need to be better at identifying when we're low before something happens, because I'm bad at that. I just say yes to everything, and then you might get asked by your family, can you just do this one more thing? And of course you say yes because it's your family, and then you just fucking lose it, and you realise, you know what? If I hadn't said yes to some things earlier on today, I'd probably be able to say yes to my family without emptying my cup and flipping out. I think the important thing there is identifying how much you've got in the tank and having boundaries and not saying yes to everything, because then you've always got something in the tank to give to yourself later, or your family later, or whoever asks you for that one last thing that you just makes you explode. Or someone cuts you up on the road, or you get a broken knife when you chop in, or you spill your tea, or whatever it might be. It doesn't make you flip out because you've already got stuff in the tank. You've already got a bit of time, you've already got a bit of structure, you've already got a bit of...
Just on this topic, I heard like a little podcast this morning from someone called Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. Really good guy.
You sent me onto that. It's good.
Yeah. Feel Better, Live More is his podcast. But he's got a spin-off on Amazon Music, and he was talking about how we're nervous about showing our vulnerabilities to even our closest friends, because we're worried they'll think less of us.
Yes, correct.
And I think that's part of it as well, that we're still kind of working our way through with that. But can you honestly say that you're comfortable sharing your vulnerabilities with somebody else? And it's like, no, I can't.
No.
And that's where I think where perfectionism sometimes comes from, because you feel like you've got to just be like, everything's got to be A-okay.
Or they might not like you, or they might hate you, or they might be cut off by you.
Well, I think you're just being a bit soft or weak, or like, that doesn't. But mostly, like, that's not going to happen. Probably most people respond with kindness and go, yeah, completely understand how you would do that.
I was about to say, have you noticed that when you and also one of our very close friends in our friendship group told us, the other friends in the group, that they were struggling mentally, had mental health problems, they've been having counselling, and trying to solve the problem. I think it was a really kind and lovely reaction to you and him when you shared that. We didn't think, oh my God, it's being vulnerable, can't believe he can't handle it. We were both like, yeah. Everyone was like, yeah, I get it. Yeah. And I think everybody was quite accepting. I don't know how it felt for you, because you were the one like opening up and being vulnerable to us. So I don't know how it felt for you, but I thought the reaction was really positive.
Yeah, it's really, really positive, mate. I mean, it's so helpful, just that one act where you get that feedback. You can subconsciously or even consciously think people are gonna go, that's a bit embarrassing. It's a bit embarrassing, or that's not, so that Darren's got a weakness, and they might use that, or think less of you and think, it's silly. It's just being, he's not on top of his game. But I think nobody's on top of their game, and it's impossible, because there's too many games to be played. So you can't be on top of every game all the time, right? It's just fact. It's just fact. So I think the more you can be open about your vulnerabilities, like whatever they are for each person,
and that's part of acceptance,
sort of better,
as well.
really.
Yeah, you were talking about accepting that we all have stuff and we all do it, and that's part of accepting it as well. Yeah, we're quite low on time now. Actually, we're almost at time.
Bang on the money, aren't we?
Bang on the money. So I thought I'd just wrap up there, if that's all right, Daz. This was really. Do you know what I found about today? It was a really deep one today. It's a different pace. It was really deep, and I really appreciate that. I really got into it.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, really helpful.
Brilliant. Well, thank you.
Hope it was for other people.
Yeah, me too. Fingers crossed. So thanks again for joining us this time. And in May, I know there's a lot of bank holidays, but we'll get our next monthly mental health check-in done in May.
Sounds good. Enjoy the spring.
You too. Have a lovely weekend, and thanks for joining us today. Cheers, Darren.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.